I need to replace the electric fans in my 66 Mustang because they pull so much current, it melted my wires. Let me show you why. What's up guys, my name is Andy. Not too long ago, I installed a larger radiator and a dual electric fan setup to keep up with the cooling demands on my 347 stroker. I took that 16-inch radiator that's stock on the first-gen Mustangs, cut out the core supports to make room for a 24-inch radiator. To go with that, I needed some fans. And so it's a popular, I don't want to say mod or upgrade, but there's, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an electric fan setup from the Ford Contour that's the 24 inches in width, it's dual fans, it's a pretty simple setup and it's cheap. You can have them, you can find them for less than $100 online, brand new, ready to install. A little bit of modification to the plastics on the side to mount it to your radiator and you're good to go. It's pretty tough to beat. You get a lot of cooling capacity, a lot of cooling power for not a lot of money, but it comes at a cost. And I didn't do my research, my homework on that, and I didn't realize how much amperage that these fans draw. They can draw up to 120 amps, 60 amps each when you do the startup, when the fans initially start to move. And then when they're running, they're around 25 to 27 amps each to keep those fans spinning. Let's call it 50 to 55 amps just to keep the fans turning. That's a lot of amperage draw. And if you've got a stock alternator, you're gonna be maxing out what that thing can do just to keep up with the fans, let alone anything else in the car. I have a 100 amp alternator in my car, I've got upgrade, but when these fans kick on, this car bogs down a little bit because that alternator has to turn to generate the amps that's needed. It's a lot of work. I didn't realize that when I got that set up. It does work. I don't have any cooling issues with this car, but I am having electrical issues, so much so it melted the wire. A little while ago, one of the fans wasn't working. I thought maybe the fan itself had stopped. I went through, started trying everything. I tried powering the fan independently from the system, hooking up a battery and stuff. And I found out that I had melted a wire. And part of it is because I have probably too small a gauge wire for this. They recommend 10 gauge wire at a minimum for these fans because they're so hungry. And that's not what I have. And so the wire melted, the one fan stopped working because I have a power wire for each fan because they are so hungry. I've got dual 30 amp fuses tucked in underneath the core support over here to power this system, or to protect this system. I popped those fuses when I first installed this. It's been a lot of work to keep this going, but I'm at the point where I don't need that kind of amperage draw to get the cooling power that I need. I also did that electric fan setup at the time because it was cheap, and as I'm trying to do everything else in the car, trying to stay in my budget like most of us, I tried to go the cheaper route, and in the end, I'm gonna have to spend more money. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna upgrade to keep a dual fan setup, but I'm gonna put in some aftermarket fans and then wire it up and get rid of this fan setup that I have in here. So the radiator that I have is a Champion radiator. It's another popular brand for these cars. And they make a custom cutout piece for dual fans that fits right onto the radiator. I don't have to make anything. I don't make any brackets or anything. So I like that. So I went ahead and picked that up. And then I've got two SPAL fans, S-P-A-L. And these are gonna be, they say 13 amps to keep these things spinning. That's less than half, or about half of what each of my fans are running now. So the amperage draw on my system is going to be much less than what it currently is. They're the same size fans. They should have the same cooling capacity. So I'm going to put this together, take this system off my car, and see how it works. Now, for those of you that are watching this, because if you are maybe wanting to put electric fans on your car, it's not that this Ford Contour setup is bad, it's just really amperage hungry. If you've got the electrical system for it, you'll be fine. I just think that I can do the same work with less amperage, but it's gonna come at a cost. So I'm gonna put this in. I'll show you a little bit about the wiring, but let's jump right in. So this is the fan I'm gonna install. Here's the part number for those that are looking for that. I'll put the part numbers for the stuff in the description below the video. But I've got two of these fans, and then I've got this cutout system now. We've got holes in the side here to mount to the radiator, which is great. I already went ahead and marked the holes I need to drill out for this because it's got some mounting holes on the radiator. And notice there's a flat side right here. That's gonna be great because it's gonna allow us to put these fans up right next to each other and maximize how much of this area that I can cover with the fan and keep both of them on here. But for those that are wondering about wiring, let's do that real quick. Let's cover what we've got. I've already got it set up. I don't need to do any additional wiring. I'm just gonna hook up the leads off of the fan into the system I already have. Which is great, look, they even tell you which wire is positive, which is awesome. But what if you don't have electric fans? I've got other videos on this, but the real quick and dirty is you take a standard automotive relay. What I've got in my car is a 40 amp relay. It's a standard automotive relay and with the same wiring layout as what we've got here with these same terminal numbers. These are important. And what you need is a 6 to 12 volt trigger, something that is hot when the car is on. It doesn't have to be from the well, it can't be from the battery because it would be a constant source, but just something that is available that's somewhere between 6 and 12 volts when the car is on. Go to this terminal, and then we're gonna take 85 down to a ground. Now we're gonna take a power wire from the battery, put a fuse on it, and go right into terminal number 30, and then terminal 87 out to the fans. In this case, that would be these guys right here, this positive wire. So that's how simple it is. Relays are really, really simple. Again, I've got other videos on how to do this stuff, but this is the quick and dirty picture that you'd want for setting up a relay to trigger these. And then the last thing I'll point out is that in this case, the ground I have is a temperature switch in my thermostat for my car. So when I reach a certain temperature, there's a range that this is set up for. When I reach that range, it will ground out that switch, and that completes this ground part. If you just went straight to a ground with this, the fans would be on every time the car is on. You may want that, but I only want the fans to come on when the engine is hot, so I use this part right here to connect to that temperature switch, and it turns on when the car gets hot, and then when the car cools down, it disconnects the ground in that switch, disconnects the relay, shuts the power off to the fans. For mounting these fans to this shroud, you're just gonna need some hardware. I've got a drawer full of hardware here. I've got a real low profile head screw that'll come up from the back side. So once I drill the holes, put that through, and then I've got a nut on here and just secure it. And so I've got plenty of those here in this little drawer. I just need to drill the holes, and then I can get these mounted up, and we're good to go on this part. All right, now that we got those all cleaned up, let's do a little test fit here. Make sure everything lines up. That looks good. I got a little line right here that I made so I know where the center of this is, because I got to perfectly center these two fans. Cool. All right, that one looks good there. And the other one will go right here. Awesome. All right, let's get the hardware in, and I think we'll be good there. Well, this is typically the best part on other electronic devices, pulling this plastic off. It'd be kind of a pain here because it doesn't come off in one big sheet. But we do need to get this off here before we mount everything. This is also a good time to point out you should probably make sure that you've got the correct fan. These are pull fans. They pull the air through the radiator instead of push fans. If they were push fans, they'd go on the other side of the radiator, which I don't want them on the front. I think that would not look good. So I'm just going to loosely put in all the hardware here, just get everything kind of set up. And then once I get everything centered, then I can go in and lock everything down and tighten it all up. All right, from here, make just sure there's any little fine-tune adjustments. I can move these just a little bit, but I think we're gonna be pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and lock them down, and then we'll be done with this part. So the next part I need to do is take out everything I've got going. I've got these brackets that I made to fit this. I'm gonna reuse the hardware that's holding my new shroud to the radiator, but the brackets I won't need. And I need to undo the wiring. I'm gonna leave the fuses that I've got here. My power wire is coming in right here. Actually, I ran it underneath the core support from my fuses all the way over to here. Going to the fuses, and then coming out here, I've got a ground wire right here, and then these are my power wires. So I can go ahead and leave that. So I'm gonna connect those, so I don't need to rewire anything. But I do need to disconnect all that loom off of there and get this fan uninstalled from the radiator to make room for the new one. So now that we've unplugged the harness, we can set that aside for now. Let's get this guy out of here. I was gonna say real quick, one of the reasons why I like this setup, this Ford Contour fan, is the depth. It's a pretty shallow fit. In our first gen Mustangs, the distance from the water pump pulley to the radiator, there's not a lot of space in here. So having something that was really thick was gonna be real limiting. And I like the fact that this not only is pretty thin, but it also gives you room to kind of move and get this out of here. Now there's no reason to get rid of that other setup. I could always, I guess, use it as a backup if something were to happen, but let's put this guy in here. I did want to point out real quick, when you're putting, for those of you that have the Champion radiator and you're buying this Champion shroud, pay attention to where the holes are so they line up. If not, you have to turn the fans around if you want the wiring coming out of the bottom like I did. I had to switch the fans around. So cool. So again, the holes are lining up here on the flanges. That's great. I think from here, we can just bolt it in. All right, now we are mounted. Everything's in good place. I did want to point out again, what's nice about this Champion Radiator Shroud and Champion Radiators, the holes line up. I don't have to drill anything. It just fits in place, and I really like that. And it looks good. I don't have to make anything. That's another thing too that was great about this setup. Cool, so the next thing to do, and this is not the glamorous part, but I'm just gonna take the wiring. So I had 2 connectors. The one went to each fan, and I'm gonna more or less do the same thing. I'm gonna take these plugs off because these go with the other fan setup, but I'll just take the wiring and make some connectors for this, and then hook this up, and then zip tie everything nice and neat underneath the fans here so that it looks good. It looks clean, looks like we're trying. And but what's great about the wiring is everything's already set up. I've got fuse connections for each fan. I've got a ground already set up. I just need to replace this thing with some spade connectors, and we're in business. Here's just a sneak peek at the wiring. Got everything all hooked up. I think this is a good time to test the setup before I put all the loom back on here and tuck all the wires in. And because of the way I have my fan set up, I've got it on a switch that I can leave it on auto so that the temperature switch does the part where it turns the fans on when it needs to, or I can turn them on from the dash inside my car if I, for whatever reason, I need to cool the engine down because that's not working or whatever's going on. So we can go ahead and turn the car on, and I'll flip the switch and we'll see if the fans work. All right, key on and flip the switch. Awesome. So that worked. We got both fans spinning. That's exactly what we want. So I think from here we can just go ahead and clean up all the wiring and we'll be good to go. Alrighty, now we got the wires all tucked in. Everything's nice and neat and clean. And let's do one last check, make sure I didn't miss anything with the wiring. Let's hit the key on here. And then we're gonna turn the fans on with the switch. Yep, they're working. Awesome, so that was an easy upgrade. Again, I already had the wiring for the electric fan, so that made this really simple. If you were adding electric fans, I've got some other videos on how to set that up and how to wire it and how to connect to things, so you might want to check that out. But for this setup, I think this looks pretty good. It came out real clean, and I like that parts fit without having to modify stuff, right? That makes it really easy. This other fan, there's no reason to get rid of this. I'll hold on to it. This really is, it's a good setup. This thing moves a lot of CFM, moves a lot of air, right? But it's just real hungry on the amperage. If you've got an electrical system that can keep up with it, and you got the wiring that can keep up with it, then you're probably fine. But I was just finding that this was pretty taxing on what I had, and I figured I want to do something different. And then it was really cheap to start with, right? I mean, you can get these, again, for less than $100. That's a lot of fan for less than $100. This setup here, quite a bit more. But when you buy performance fans, you get a name brand stuff instead of just something off of some website somewhere where the CFM is kind of iffy. This stuff is gonna be good, and then that Champion Shroud fits my Champion Radiator, which is fantastic. So cool, all right, well that's done, and we're on to the next project. We'll see you in the next one.